Open the podcast bay door as hell.
Hello everyone, and welcome to episode 34 of Welcome to Geektown. I'm your host, Kurt Onstead. I've been a proud geek all my life, being into role-playing games, board games, sci-fi, fantasy, and especially superheroes and comics. And I want to help others join me in those pursuits. But I've found that sometimes people can get overwhelmed or feel left out because they don't already have what some consider the requisite knowledge to be considered a fan. And that's where Welcome to Geektown comes in. Here you can ask your questions without feeling like a gatekeeper is calling you out for not yet being fully versed in every aspect of your new interest. This week we have a question from Teresa E., who would like to know, what's the obsession with Firefly about? That's a good question, Teresa. Let's get in our bunk, put on our tight pants, and aim to misbehave as we dive into the cult favorite show to see why its fans continue to soar like leaves on the wind. I'll do my best to avoid spoilers, because if you haven't seen the show yet, I hope this episode gets you interested, and I wouldn't want to accidentally ruin any of the moments along the way. For the uninitiated, let's start with the basics. Firefly is a television show that aired primarily in 2002 and was created by Joss Whedon, who was responsible for bringing the Buffy and Angel shows to life as well. His credits now also include creating the TV show Dollhouse, helping to create Marvel's Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., directing Avengers and Avengers Age of Ultron, as well as finishing up Justice League after Zack Snyder's departure due to the sudden tragedy that befell his family. Comic book readers may also know of his runs on Astonishing X-Men, Runaways, and for continuing the Buffy and Angel show's stories in comic book form. He originally came to Hollywood's attention as a writer, writing for the hit TV show Roseanne in its early seasons, and is officially credited with a screenplay for Toy Story. He was also a well-known script doctor, providing polishes or uncredited scripts on Speed, Twister, and the first X-Men movie, among others. Joss often writes strong women in his works, something he has been lauded for in the past, although that praise has been muted by reports from his ex-wife, among others, that he may not be quite as feminist as first believed. But those accusations were years away when Firefly was being created, so for that reason, among others, I'm not going to spend much time on them now that I've noted their existence. Getting back to Firefly, the basic premise of the show is that of a captain and his crew who travel through space doing whatever jobs come their way, legal or not, that allow them to continue flying and hopefully stay off the radar of the Alliance, a militaristic confederation that controls most of the inhabited worlds. The crew of the Serenity, the name of the ship, which is a Firefly class, thus the name of the show, consists of war veterans Captain Malcolm, Mal, Reynolds, and his first mate Zoe, both of whom were on the losing side of the Unification War, in which the independent Browncoats were defeated by the Alliance. The pilot is Zoe's snarky husband, who goes by Wash. The official crew is rounded out by compassionate engineer Kaylee and gruff mercenary Jane.
Jane is a girl's name.
Jane ain't a girl.
In addition, the ship has Anara, who works as a companion and rents one of the attached shuttles to get to her various clients. And finally, there are 3 permanent passengers: Shepherd Book, a pastor with a mysterious past, and the brother and sister pair of Simon and River Tam. River, a child prodigy, was experimented on by Alliance scientists, which led her to being psychotic, but also possibly psychic. Simon was able to rescue his sister from the lab where she was being experimented on, and in the original pilot for the show, smuggled her onto the Serenity in a cryogenic chamber. But she was discovered and released from hibernation. Simon now trades his skills as a doctor in exchange for safe harbor for himself and his sister. This brings us to one of the main aspects of the show that is consistently praised by its fans: the complexity and depth of the characters. Although the show only aired for most of one season, plus a movie, which I'll get into in a little while, we learn a lot of the backstory for each of the main characters, as well as getting teases for potential further fleshing out of their previous lives. In other popular science fiction shows, it's usually 3 or 4 seasons before we get as deep a character study as we did of these characters in just 14 episodes. Combine that with Joss's trademark snappy dialogue, and Firefly is one of the best written sci-fi shows ever, especially for a first season. And the cast was made up of actors mostly at the beginning of their careers, with the exception of Barney Miller veteran Ron Glass, but have almost all gone to be mainstays in genre fiction. Nathan Fillion, Adam Baldwin, Summer Glau, and Alan Tudyk have all succeeded their parts in Firefly with starring roles in other television shows and movies, including Castle, Chuck, The Sarah Connor Chronicles, and Rogue One, A Star Wars Story, respectively. Now, unfortunately, the powers that be at Fox, the network that aired Firefly in its original run, did not recognize what they had, and made multiple decisions that led to the show's inevitable demise. To start with, the show began with episode 2. The network was not a fan of the 2-hour pilot, and so told Joss and his crew to create a new introductory episode, which became the 1-hour pilot called The Train Job. While 14 episodes were filmed, Fox only aired 11 of them, put the show on Friday, a well-known death slot for network television, and did not air them in their intended order, making relationships jump ahead then regress in strange ways that would not have been the case had they aired correctly. To add insult to injury, not all of the country had the chance to see all of the original aired episodes, as Fox would preempt the show with local sporting events. Since this was before the days of streaming services and other options for watching the show, this, combined with other factors, led to the show's cancellation. Fans of the show, who call themselves Browncoats after the rebels that Mal and Zoe were a part of, petitioned first Fox, then other networks to pick up the show for a second season, but were unsuccessful. Had the show come out today, it's likely that Netflix or another streaming service would have snatched it up, but at the time, those were not options. But we did get a movie just a few years later. How did that happen? Find out right after this. There are a lot of ways you can listen to Welcome to Geektown. But did you know that you can actually get paid just for listening to this, or almost any of your other favorite podcasts? I recently found out about this free app called Podcoin, and it literally pays you to listen to podcasts. Here's how it works. You listen to podcasts, and you earn Podcoin while you listen. Then you turn that Podcoin in for gift cards at places like Amazon or Starbucks. Or if you're feeling generous, you could even donate that Podcoin to charity. The more you listen, the more you earn. Just download the app right now on iPhone or Android and use the sign-up code GEEKTOWN, and you'll get 300 bonus Podcoin just for signing up. Keep listening, and eventually you'll earn enough Podcoin to get a cappuccino at Starbucks or an Amazon gift card worth a few bucks. So go ahead and go listen to this podcast on Podcoin, and sign up with the code GEEKTOWN. Thanks. And now, back to the show. As I mentioned before, streaming services were not creating new content yet back in 2003, so a Netflix revival was not an option. However, what we did have at the time were DVD box sets. Just the previous year, strong DVD sales and syndicated reruns had led to a Family Guy revival. Firefly was released in an excellent set that included all 14 episodes in widescreen. Fox had insisted that the show air in the old 4:3 format, but Joss shot them with widescreen in mind. In their intended order, and with behind-the-scenes features and commentaries on many of the episodes. For me personally, this was how I discovered the show, as I had come across one scene on TV in its original run, and it hadn't impressed me. It's one of those things that's funnier in context. Sales on this set were so strong that Joss was able to convince Universal Pictures to greenlight a movie, hoping to lead to a continuing franchise, either as movies or another TV show run. Titled Serenity, the movie was released in 2005. Despite mostly positive reviews, and the fans' cultish devotion to the show, Serenity was not able to reach a wider audience and underperformed at the box office, meaning that hopes of a trilogy or continuing franchise were dead. As were two of the main characters. I personally wonder if the movie would have performed better had those two not died in the way they did, as those deaths are hard to watch. Perhaps people didn't go back for repeat viewings that they would have otherwise. So, what keeps people coming back to watch the show again and again, and continue to petition for Season 2 or some other continuation? Well, I've mentioned a couple of items that I think contributed to the show's fanbase. The writing and acting are top-notch, and the show does some things differently from most sci-fi franchises, setting it apart. For one, the main characters are mostly not particularly important in the grand scheme of things. They don't pilot the flagship of the fleet, they're not the leaders of a rebellion. They're simply working-class men and women trying to keep flying in a world that makes that difficult. Another small difference that I personally love is how they depict space. Unlike nearly every other sci-fi franchise, when the camera is out in space, it's completely silent, other than the show's score or radio chatter. This combined with the handheld look of the show, where even the effect shots will zoom and refocus, give an almost documentary feel to Firefly, making you feel like you're there with the crew. Another important aspect of the fanbase has been the love that the cast and crew continue to show for the property, over 15 years after the show first aired. Nathan Fillion and Alan Tudyk in particular continue to reference their characters whenever they can in other projects they work on, like Castle's space cowboy Halloween costume, and the entire premise of Tudyk's web series, Con Man. Fans can often tell when there's a genuine affection and when actors are simply doing it for the paycheck, and the true love the cast has for the show and for each other shines through and adds to the love of the fans. Simply put, Firefly is one of the most unique and best science fiction shows that has ever been released. The fact that it only got the one season has given it that cult status that attracts the most die-hard of fans. It's hard to see people losing their love of the show, and as they introduce it to others, the fanbase continues to grow. And while we haven't ever gotten a second season or another movie, the story continues in comics. Dark Horse has put out over a dozen issues of Serenity comics, mostly written by people involved in the original show. Whether you want to learn the backstories of some of the characters, or fill in the gap between the TV show and movie, or see the continuing adventures after the movie is over, there are stories to fill your need. Go to your friendly neighborhood comic book store and check them out. So that's a wrap on Firefly and Serenity. I hope that if you're already a fan, you learned a little something new, and if you're not yet a fan, that this encourages you to go check it out. Are there any other sci-fi or fantasy franchises you'd like to hear more about? Or do you have some other question you'd like answered? This show is powered by your suggestions, so please send me an email at welcometogeektown, all spelled out, @gmail.com. Or leave a comment directly on the show notes at www.welcome2, the number 2 in this case, geektown.com. Other contact options include facebook.com/welcometogeektown or Twitter @geektownpodcast. Also, if you'd like to support the show directly, come join the Patreon at patreon.com/welcometogeektown for just $1 per month to get access to full scripts of the shows, outtakes, and a monthly shoutout. You can also help the show grow by subscribing and giving a 5-star review over on iTunes to join the Geektown City Council, which helps other people find the show so we can all tell them, "Welcome to Geektown, population, us." Welcome to Geektown is written, narrated, edited, and produced by me, Kurt Onstead. Theme music is by Aaron Levitz, logo art by Archie Santana. All other sound clips are the copyrighted material of their respective owners, and no infringement is intended, falling under fair